really wanted to make a Valorant video. On stream we already figured out quite a few things about the world of Valorant, and to a certain degree we already know why they are planting bombs there. So I thought explaining that would make an interesting video. But Riot keeps releasing more and more cinematics, and since this channel is still focused on League, we have to focus on those first. But at first I wasn't sure if I should cover them all, but you guys convinced me that people are interested in me explaining the importance of these cinematics. But the thing is, the Shadow Isles cinematic should come roughly tomorrow, if not today, so I have no idea when I will get to Valorant. With that said, without further ado, let's continue with another cinematic from the Tales of Runeterra. This time it's the one called The Raid. Just like it was with the Demacian cinematic, here we also got introduced a new place. The Arvong. Or Darvong? Darvong. One of those three. Which, just like the Demacian place, also isn't shown on the map yet. So we don't really know where it is. But based on the architecture, this seems to be an Avarosan village, because the buildings look similar to what we saw in the Ash comics. The Winter's Claw villages look more Viking-like, and the Frostguard is building stone castles. So I'm pretty sure this is an Avarosan village. And since the Avarosans hold the central Freljord, it is probably roughly around there. First of all, this village was set on fire, hence the name of this cinematic. The village is being raided. But those of you who got a really good memory when it comes to pictures may also recognize this shot from the dev post, where Ghostcrawler was teasing all the cinematics. This exact shot was one of the teased images. But now let's get into what's actually happening here. At the very beginning we can hear Braum talking. He mentions that in the Freljord they all come from the same family. And just like all families, they fight. What he probably meant by this is that all Freljordians trace back to their roots in the era of the Three Sisters. That's when all Freljordians were still united, and they were all one big family. But then as the camera moves up to set up the story, we can see Braum in person, who is kicking people off of a cliff. But despite Braum being quite heroic, and honestly we have never seen Braum this violent, Braum isn't the main character here. The main character is the woman behind him. What's interesting is that throughout this entire cinematic, we never learn her name. But right after her initial introduction, you can notice a really cool detail. You can see that her blade is glowing bright blue when she swings it, which is a foreshadowing of what is actually happening in this cinematic. And believe me when I say that a lot of people missed the actual point of this story. But we'll get to that. Right after she takes down the first enemy, she orders one of her warriors to retreat and protect a child, while she holds back the rest of the enemies. And as another one of them charges at her, based on the armor, it is obvious that the enemies are the Frostguard. We know this because their appearance matches both the designs on Universe and in the book. They have very iconic helmets that give honor to the Ice Witch. Now, Lyssandra's Frostguard are acting in service of a Frost Priest. And the Frost Priest's job is to find Iceborne warriors, convince them to join Lyssandra's cause, and if they refuse, eliminate them. We saw what the Frost Priests were really like in Ash's comic. There was one who ultimately had to try and take down Ash, and other Frost Priests were hunting down Sejuani. So knowing this, you can already guess what's happening here. Because despite their appearance, and despite people thinking that Lysandra is actually super evil, the Frostguard aren't really that violent. They usually strike with some kind of purpose. And again, you can probably guess what they are doing here. In fact, after a rain of arrows kills the retreating warrior, which puts the child in danger, our main character gets obviously upset. So she rushes back to protect the child. And when one of the dying Frostguards tries to stop her, it is revealed that her blade is indeed a true ice weapon. Which means that our main character is an Iceborne, because only Iceborne warriors are able to hold true ice. Which suddenly reveals the point of this entire cinematic. The reason why the Frostguard are attacking is because they are hunting this person. She probably refused to join Lysandra, and so she became their enemy. Unfortunately, the combination of her power and her anger was quite strong, and the place began to crumble. For a second there is a brief shot of Braum holding the child, which is kinda playing to his character, because Braum holding the massive shield is supposed to be all about protecting his family. But then when it's revealed that the main character used too much of her power, Braum drops a massive bomb. He calls the main character his cousin.
Cousin, we must leave.
So obviously, if you know me, I had to Google what that actually means. Last time I didn't do that and I called any stepsister her sister-in-law. Or the other way around. I actually still don't know which one is which. So anyway, a cousin means that one of Brom's parents had a sibling, and that sibling had a child. And that's the person here. She is the child of Brom's uncle or aunt. But still, as I said at the beginning, the cinematic never reveals her name. So from now on, I will just call her cousin. Anyway, seeing the state of the place around them, Brom made the call that they should run away. But his cousin still couldn't move. And what didn't help the situation is that the cracks in the ice below them began to quickly spread. And they both realized that they couldn't do anything at this point, because even if they did move, they would fall. And then there is this awesome shot of even more Frost Guard stepping in. What I noticed is that the Frost Guard keep letting out weird grunts, even though they are supposed to be normal people. So I wonder what's happening here. I wonder if this group of Frostguard are just barbarians? Because you need to remember the Frostguard recruited everyone. So these guys could be totally uncivilized. Or who knows, maybe these guys are just raised undead. I strongly doubt that's the case. But just to remind you, in the latest story about Lysandra, there was a frozen Iceborn who was totally dead. And yet he was somehow alive, kept up by the power of the Ice Witch. So at this point I wouldn't be surprised even if these guys were the undead. But again, that's totally dumb, so forget what I just said. But then the cousin says, raise him well. But in the context of the Freljord, we still don't know whose child it is. They could be protecting a child that's not even theirs. It could be just one of the Avarosans. And to the Avarosans, everyone who joins them is their family. So just keep in mind that even though it is highly likely that this is the child of the cousin, it is not confirmed, and so this could be anyone's. Anyway, the cousin tries to sacrifice herself by causing a frost explosion that would cut them off from the Frost Guard, but at the same time, it broke the ice and caused an avalanche. In fact, if you look closer, you can see the cousin flying up from the explosion and off of the cliff. But at the end of the day, Brom is Brom, and so he saves the day. First, he grabs the child and surfs away with it. This is a callback to the old legend of Brom, where he surfed down a volcano after he fought a dragon. Then he grabs his cousin midair, and he uses his shield to save them both. And here is where we get another very interesting reveal. Remember how in my older video when I was talking about the power of all champions, I mentioned that Brom isn't actually as powerful as people think? Because up until this day, it was never confirmed whether Brom can even use ice magic. To us, he was just a man who was really strong, and he was holding the doors to an enhanced vault. The story never mentioned that he would be able to use the ice magic that was stored within the seal on the shield. But here, since this cinematic is canon, and Brom is actually using the power of the true ice in the shield, we finally know that what Brom does in the game, he can actually do it in the story as well. Up until today, that was never confirmed. But then we got the beautiful shot when Brom was holding back the avalanche. And as he did that, if you listen closely to the music at the background, you can hear the last 4 notes of Brom's theme. This entire section of the cinematic is very calming, because this is what Brom does. Everything Brom is, from a big man with a mustache to the fact that he's holding a shield, his entire character is based on protecting his family. Under normal circumstances, that would be just life in Freljord. But here, the family is literal. When the avalanche passes, Brom continues talking about what he said at the beginning, and he mentions that the fighting tears them apart, and that they only survive together. By this he's referencing the fact that Freljordians got torn into separate factions, and they can only survive this civil war if they bunch together. In the last shot of this cinematic, there is a totally different village. The architecture is still the same, so this also has to be an Avarosan village. But what's weird is that this means that this village is very close to the one at the beginning. Because if the fighting happened near the village that was on fire, that means that they just fell down the hill and there was the other village. So if they were chased by the Frost Guard, that means that the Frost Guard knows about this village as well. So this one will probably also burn. Anyway, this has to be an Avarosan territory, because Braum is allied with them, and it is probably somewhere near the open ocean. So since the Avarosans hold the central Freljord, we can roughly guess where this takes place. In fact, roughly around these places is where Ash and Sejuani met after so many years, so it shouldn't be too surprising to see an Avarosan village near the coast. And as the cinematic fades away with the final shot, again, if you listen to the music at the background, you can notice that the final music that closes the video is a cover of the Freljordian theme that is used for the Holding Abyss. What I really love about this cinematic is that Braum suddenly got a lot more lore, or rather more interesting lore, that turned him into a more interesting character. Previously, we didn't really know much about Braum. He liked to hurt animals in the mountains, and he liked to help people. According to the legends, he fought dragons, he drank trolls under the table, he broke off the door of a magical vault, and overall he was just a chill guy. But there was never actually a point to his story. Although he did interesting things, he never did anything meaningful. So to suddenly see Braum actually fight back people, by which I mean he was actually throwing them off of the cliff and he was killing them, that gave Braum a little bit more sauce. We also saw the real side of him, the one that is willing to go violent when it comes to protecting his family. Speaking of which, yes, there is a new character for us to talk about, Braum's cousin. Now, as I said, we didn't know much about Braum anyway, so I literally know nothing about her. Nothing besides the fact that her weapon is fused with true ice, and that she is an Iceborn. So there is the possibility that she will be an important character later, because as we learned from Lysandra's newest story, she is trying to gather all the Iceborn she can, because she will likely need their powers to prevent the Watchers from breaking through the ice that is holding them back. But I guess that will be explained later. For now, just sit back because the Shadow Isle cinematic is on its way. Who knows, maybe it is already out. In which case, please let me know if you'd like to see me cover that cinematic as well, because if not, I will finally have to put together all the Valorant lore. I spend a lot of time in that game, not shooting people, I'm awful at that, but running around and looking at the floor, because everything on those maps is hinting towards some lore. I have to say, my teammates didn't appreciate it. Hey, did you know that we have social media and Twitch where we talk about other League facts and stories? And did you know that we have neat mugs and shirts too? The links to all of that will be below. And as always, thank you, come again.